A black woman CEO goes undercover to test her staffs. 10 minutes later, she fired everyone in the building. Before we continue, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this channel as we dish out fresh, engaging stories daily. Enjoy the story. Raquel Jackson sat behind her grand mahogany desk, the soft hum of her office providing a comforting background to her otherwise turbulent thoughts. The early morning light filtered through the large windows, illuminating the success that surrounded her. The view from her office was a testament to what she had built, a thriving empire from scratch. But today, as she stared at the latest performance reports, the pride she felt was tinged with frustration. One particular division stood out like a sore thumb. The numbers were steadily declining, and the recent customer reviews were filled with complaints. Yet, this division had always been one of the top performers. Something was wrong, but what? The employees were the same, the systems were the same. Why the sudden drop in performance? Raquel had heard whispers around the office about inefficiency, apathy, and a lack of dedication. At first, she dismissed them, assuming it was just office gossip. But the numbers didn't lie. Something had changed, and it was time to get to the bottom of it. The next morning, Raquel arrived at the office before anyone else. The air was still, the building quiet and empty. She wore the worn-out uniform, the unflattering outfit that would make her blend into the background. She pushed a cleaning cart along the hallways, moving through the back entrance to avoid being seen. No one would recognize her, and that was the point. As she walked through the building, the familiar faces of her employees passed by, completely unaware of who she truly was. Raquel's heart pounded in her chest as she observed the first few employees trickling in. She kept her head down, pretending to focus on her cleaning duties, but her eyes were scanning everything. She watched as employees wandered in at their own pace, some with coffee in hand, others without a care in the world. No one seemed to be in a rush. There was a sense of laziness, an aura of complacency that hung in the air. One employee, a senior manager, arrived late again. Raquel had seen this person's name on several performance reviews, all of them glowing with praise. But today, the manager strolled in without a hint of urgency, like it was just another casual day. Raquel's grip tightened on the cleaning cart, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. How could this person, this key member of her team, be so carefree when everything was on the line? As Raquel moved deeper into the office, her eyes caught more troubling sights. A group of employees gathered around the break room, laughing and chatting instead of getting to work. Their voices echoed through the halls, too loud for a space that was supposed to be focused on productivity. Raquel's frustration grew. These weren't just small mistakes. They were signs of a larger issue. This wasn't a one-off situation. This was a culture of inefficiency, and it was running rampant. Raquel continued to move through the building, pretending to clean while her mind worked furiously. The people she had trusted to run this company, the ones she had built this empire with, were letting it slip through their fingers. She had built this company on values of hard work and commitment, but that was nowhere to be found today. The employees were comfortable, too comfortable, and it made her stomach churn. Her discomfort deepened as she watched more employees, high-ranking ones at that, become distracted. Phones were out, people were chatting, and some were even taking extended breaks without any consequences. Raquel had expected some level of distraction, but this was beyond unacceptable. This wasn't the company she had worked so hard to create. This was a company on the brink of failure, not because of external forces, but because of the complacency within. Raquel's frustration reached a boiling point as she watched a group of employees laughing over a new meme on their phones. They didn't even acknowledge the work that was piling up around them. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. This wasn't just a few bad habits. It was a systemic issue, a deep-rooted problem that couldn't be ignored anymore. Raquel stood still for a moment, absorbing the weight of what she had just uncovered. This wasn't just about one bad manager or a few lazy employees. It was about a culture that had gone unchecked for too long. She had trusted her team, but now she knew the truth. They had taken her trust for granted, and it was time for a change. As she pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway, Raquel's mind was made up. This would be the moment that changed everything. The truth was clear now. It was time to take action, and she would do whatever it took to turn this company around. The future of the company was at risk, and it was up to her to save it. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Raquel was ready. She had uncovered the truth in the most unlikely way, and now it was time to act. Raquel quietly continued her cleaning duties, her movements deliberate and unhurried as she pushed the cart down the hallway. It was almost too easy to blend in, too easy to become just another invisible figure in the background. She wiped down desks, flicked a cloth over the countertops, and polished the windows, but her true purpose lay in the quiet observations she made with every step. She had been in the building for nearly an hour now, and the initial shock of seeing her staff so disconnected had given way to a creeping sense of disappointment. The employees, the very people she had entrusted to build her company with her, were behaving as if they had no sense of responsibility. One by one, they arrived late, strolling into the office with no sense of urgency. It wasn't even a casual late entrance. It was as if the time on the clock meant nothing. The first few trickled in, casually chatting about their plans for the weekend, as though it were a leisurely morning rather than the beginning of a critical workday. Raquel's eyes narrowed as she watched them, each glance further cementing the unsettling feeling in her chest. She didn't say anything, didn't make her presence known. She wasn't here to confront them, yet. Instead, she continued to sweep the floors, observing every move. It wasn't just the late arrivals. It was how they moved through the office once they arrived. A few employees sat down, their attention immediately shifting to their phones. The screens lit up with notifications that had nothing to do with their work. Texts, social media, and emails from friends. Raquel could see it all. Every tap of a finger, every smile in response to a meme or funny post. These were the people who were supposed to drive the company forward, but here they were, wasting time, distracted by the trivialities of life outside the office. She moved to the next desk, her eyes catching a particularly troubling sight. An employee, a senior manager who had been with the company for years, had left his workspace in utter disarray. Papers were scattered haphazardly across the desk, some even spilling onto the floor. A few files were crammed into the drawer, but not in any order. It was as if the idea of maintaining a tidy, organized workspace, something Raquel had always preached, was entirely foreign to him. This wasn't just negligence, it was a sign of deeper indifference. If he couldn't be bothered to maintain even the smallest semblance of order in his own space, how could he be trusted to lead a team effectively? Her disappointment deepened as she continued her rounds, her mind processing what she was seeing. The office, once a place of productivity and ambition, had now become a playground. Some employees were still filtering in, their faces lazily scanning their phones while they fumbled to get their workstations together. The loud chatter in the break room echoed through the open spaces. They laughed about the latest drama on social media, about the weekend sports results, and the new restaurant in town. Their voices carried into the air, unmistakable in their carelessness. It was clear that for some, this wasn't a place of work, it was just another pit stop in their day. There was no sense of urgency, no commitment to the larger vision. Raquel paused, her breath catching in her chest. She watched as another employee strolled past, greeting her with a polite, but absent, nod. She wanted to scream out, to challenge him, to demand why he was so casual when the company was teetering on the edge of failure. But she didn't. She remained still, invisible in the background, swallowing down her frustration. Her eyes moved from one workstation to the next, noticing the same pattern repeating itself again and again. Some employees seemed to have an endless ability to chat without ever getting to work. They gathered in small groups, their conversations nothing more than idle gossip. Others, who should have been handling important tasks, seemed content to shuffle papers around, pretending to be busy. Raquel could see the facade. She could see that they were just going through the motions, each one of them hoping the day would pass quickly without any real effort. It was infuriating, but it was also telling. What she was witnessing was a breakdown in culture, a decay of the work ethic that had built the foundation of her success. The vision she had so carefully crafted for this company was being undermined by the very people who were supposed to support it. Raquel's thoughts were interrupted when she spotted one more troubling sight. A senior employee, someone who had always been a reliable figure in her team, walked by, laughing as she clicked through her phone. There was no urgency in her step, no sign that she had anything serious to attend to. Raquel's heart sank. This person had always been dependable in the past, but today, she had joined the ranks of the distracted. She was part of the problem now. Raquel took a slow, deliberate breath, keeping her presence as neutral as possible. But her mind raced. She had seen enough. The realization had hit her like a ton of bricks. This wasn't just a few isolated incidents. This was a systemic issue. A culture of complacency, a culture of apathy, had taken root, and it was slowly choking the life out of the company. Her disappointment had turned to something deeper, something far more troubling. She had known that the division was struggling, but now she understood why. It wasn't a lack of resources. It wasn't a failure of leadership. It was the people. The team that she had trusted to carry the torch had stopped caring, and in doing so, they were jeopardizing everything she had worked for. She took another slow breath, steadying herself. This was it. The moment she had been dreading. She had come here to find the truth, and now she had it. Her hands tightened around the handle of the cleaning cart, her knuckles white against the cheap plastic. She could feel the storm of emotions brewing inside her. Anger, frustration, sadness. But there was something else as well. Resolve. Raquel's mind was made up. This wasn't just a wake-up call. This was the end of an era, the end of the complacency that had seeped into the very core of her company. She had to act. There was no other choice. If she allowed this to continue, the company would collapse, and everything she had built would be destroyed. Raquel looked around one last time, absorbing the full extent of the situation. The employees were too busy with their distractions to notice her, too caught up in their own world to see the storm brewing around them. She had to make the decision now. Her heart pounded, but there was no turning back. The future of her company was at risk, and Raquel Jackson was ready to make the hard choices. This was no longer about getting answers. It was about saving everything she had worked for. She knew what had to be done. Raquel had been working silently for hours, blending into the background, pretending to be nothing more than the cleaning lady. Her heart had pounded with every observation, every disappointing sight. But now, as the morning wore on and the hum of the office continued in its usual rhythm, it was time to end the charade. She stopped mid-step, her hand gripping the worn-out cloth she had been using to clean the windows. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from the realization that this was it. This was the moment. The moment she would strip away the disguise and reveal herself as the woman who had been silently watching, who had witnessed everything. The woman they had all taken for granted. Raquel inhaled deeply, steadying herself. The cleaning uniform felt like a heavy weight now, a mask she had worn for too long. She glanced around at the employees, all absorbed in their tasks or distractions, unaware of what was about to unfold. She felt the cool, controlled air of the office around her. This space, once a place of achievement and ambition, now felt alien. Their behavior, so casual and careless, had drained the very soul from this place. It was time to let them know that the woman they had underestimated was more than just a figurehead. Without hesitation, Raquel shed her disguise. She pulled off the dirty apron, tossing it aside. The transformation was instant. What had once been a nondescript woman in a cleaning uniform was now Raquel Jackson. The CEO, the woman who had built this empire from the ground up. Her posture straightened, her shoulders squared, and she walked confidently toward the main office area. The sound of her shoes against the polished floor echoed sharply in the silence, drawing the attention of every employee in the room. Heads turned, and the conversations that had been drifting lazily through the air suddenly died. Raquel's presence filled the room, powerful and undeniable. The staff stared at her in confusion. Their eyes darted from her face to the cleaning cart she had left behind, and then back again. They were trying to process the impossible. How could the woman who had been cleaning the floors all morning be the same woman they'd been ignoring for months? For a split second, the room felt like it was suspended in time. The shock was palpable, like a gust of cold air sweeping through the office. No one moved. No one spoke. Raquel stood there, calm and composed, waiting for the realization to hit. She could see it in their eyes, the confusion, the shock, the dawning understanding. It was as though a veil had been lifted, and in that instant, they saw her for who she truly was, the person they had overlooked, the leader they had taken for granted. Raquel didn't waste any time. She stepped forward, her voice cool and firm as she addressed them. "I am Raquel Jackson," she said, her words cutting through the silence like a sharp knife. "I am the CEO of this company. And for the past few hours, I've been right here in front of you, watching." Her words landed with the weight of a sledgehammer, and the room went even quieter. Raquel didn't need to raise her voice. The calm authority in her tone was enough to command attention. She took another slow breath, her gaze sweeping across the room, meeting the eyes of every employee. She could see the shock in their faces, but she wasn't here to revel in their surprise. She was here to make her point. I've watched you walk in late, with no sense of urgency. I've watched you waste time on your phones, gossiping, and pretending to work. I've watched your desks become a mess, and I've watched your lack of respect for the very company that gave you a job. But most of all, I've watched how each one of you has failed to uphold the standards this company was built on. Raquel's voice didn't waver. It was calm, but it was heavy with the weight of disappointment. There was no anger in her tone. Just the cold, harsh truth. She wasn't here to scold them or shout at them. She wasn't here to make them feel guilty for their mistakes. She was here to tell them what needed to be said, to make them understand that this behavior was no longer acceptable. The reality is simple, Raquel continued. This company cannot, and will not, survive if this behavior continues. I've spent years building this business, and I won't let it be destroyed by apathy or complacency. I don't expect perfection, but I do expect dedication. I expect commitment. And most importantly, I expect you to respect the work you do, because the work we do here matters. Raquel paused, letting her words sink in. The employees stood frozen, unable to respond. The tension in the air was thick, and the weight of her words hung heavy over them. It was a turning point for the company, a moment they would never forget. Raquel had always been known for her composure, her ability to lead with strength and integrity, and today, that strength was on full display. She could feel the internal conflict within her, the betrayal, the disappointment, the hurt. But she didn't let it show. Her role as a leader meant that she had to make the tough decisions. And this was the toughest decision of all. She wasn't here to coddle them or make excuses. She was here to make them understand that the company's future depended on each of them taking responsibility for their actions. Raquel stepped further into the room, her eyes meeting the gaze of each person as she walked by. She didn't need to say anything more. The silence in the room spoke volumes. Every employee felt the weight of her disappointment, and each one of them knew that this moment would change everything. Raquel's calm exterior hid the storm of emotions inside her, but she refused to let it show. This wasn't about power. It wasn't about humiliating them. It was about setting a standard that she had built this company on and a standard that would define its future. She stopped at the front of the room and took one final look around. The realization had settled in. There was no turning back now. The decision had been made. It was time to rebuild. To create a culture of accountability, respect, and dedication. Raquel wasn't just the CEO. She was the woman who had created this empire, and she would fight for it, no matter the cost. Raquel stood tall, her eyes sweeping across the room as her employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The silence hung heavily in the air, thick with the weight of what was about to unfold. It was the kind of silence that foreshadowed something monumental, a moment where everything would change. The realization was dawning on each of them. The woman they had just discovered to be their CEO was not someone to be taken lightly. The woman who had silently observed them for hours now stood in front of them, unyielding and resolute. The office, once a place of casual chatter and mundane tasks, now felt like a courtroom. There was no escaping the gravity of the situation. Raquel could feel their eyes on her, the skepticism, the disbelief, and the fear slowly creeping into the room. She had seen it in their eyes earlier that day when she had revealed herself, but now it was something more, something far more tangible. This was the reckoning. Her voice broke the silence, steady and firm. I'm firing every single one of you in this room. The words hit like a thunderclap, reverberating through the room and leaving a stunned silence in their wake. Raquel didn't flinch. She didn't look down or hesitate. She stood tall, meeting their stunned gazes with a calm resolve that only strengthened her presence. She knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she had come to a decision that had been building for some time now. There was no place in her company for complacency, for disrespect, or for mediocrity. She had built this company on a foundation of hard work, dedication, and integrity. Those values had to be upheld, or everything she had built would be for nothing. The faces in front of her were no longer a team. They were a reminder of what happens when leadership falters and standards are compromised. One of the employees, a mid-level manager, stood up, his voice shaky but trying to mask it with indignation. Wait, you can't just fire us all. We've been with this company for years. We've put in the work." Raquel didn't move. She didn't respond with anger, and she didn't let her disappointment show. She simply stared at him, letting the weight of her words settle in. "You've been here for years," she said evenly. "But what good is that if you've become complacent? What good is it if you've lost sight of the company's mission? You've taken this company for granted, and that ends today. There was no place for excuses here, no room for justifications." Raquel knew what had happened. She had seen it all with her own eyes. She had witnessed the lateness, the distractions, the unprofessionalism. And most importantly, she had seen the lack of passion. The apathy that ran like a virus through the office, infecting everyone. She was done giving chances, done being lenient. This was bigger than individuals. It was about the culture of the entire company. "Complacency is a cancer," Raquel continued, her voice unwavering. "And I will not let it spread any further. You've shown me who you are, and I've seen enough. There are no second chances here." The room felt like it was suffocating, and Raquel knew the gravity of the decision she had just made. But she also knew it was the only choice. She wasn't here to be liked, and she wasn't here to make friends. She was here to protect the future of her company, to set a standard that would not be compromised. She wouldn't allow anyone to undermine the values she had spent years cultivating. Raquel's eyes scanned the room once more, taking in the faces of the people who had failed to live up to her expectations. Some looked stunned, others visibly angry, but none of them dared to speak. They were caught in the web of their own complacency, realizing too late the consequences of their actions. One by one, the employees started to stand, their movements stiff and reluctant. They gathered their belongings slowly, eyes averted, some unable to meet her gaze. Raquel's expression remained unchanged. There was no guilt, no regret. This was not a moment for emotions. It was a moment of cold, calculated leadership. She had given them a chance to prove their worth, to show that they still cared about the company and its future. But they hadn't. They had failed. And now, they would face the consequences. Raquel walked to the front of the room and stood by the door, watching as the employees filed out, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Some left without a word, heads down, while others muttered amongst themselves, trying to make sense of what had just happened. The door closed behind the last of them, leaving Raquel alone in the room. The weight of the decision finally hit her, but it didn't break her. She didn't feel guilt. She felt a sense of relief. She had done what was necessary, and now she could move forward. There was no place in her company for those who wouldn't rise to the challenge, for those who weren't willing to give everything for the success of the business. Raquel took a deep breath, letting the air fill her lungs. It was done. The office was silent now, but it wasn't empty. It was ready for something new. Raquel knew that in order to rebuild, she would need to find a new team, a team that shared her vision, a team that would carry her company forward with dedication and pride. She was ready for that challenge. As the last of the employees disappeared from view, Raquel turned toward her desk. Her hands were steady as she began making the calls that would bring in the right people. The ones who would stand with her, side by side, to rebuild this company on the foundation of excellence. The decision had been made. The company would not be held back by mediocrity. Raquel Jackson was done waiting for change. Now, she would create it. Raquel stood alone in the silence of the office, her gaze fixed on the large window that offered a panoramic view of the city below. The once bustling, vibrant workspace now felt empty, lifeless, like a shell waiting to be filled. Her heart was heavy, and yet, her mind was resolute. She had done what she had to do. The faces of her former employees flashed in her mind, each one leaving the building, their steps slow and unsure. Some had glanced back, some hadn't. Some had even tried to argue, but Raquel had remained unmoved. She had watched them all file out, and as the last one disappeared around the corner, the door closed behind them with a finality that resonated deep within her. The sadness of the moment lingered in her chest, but she knew it was a sadness born of necessity, not regret. As the weight of her decision settled in, Raquel allowed herself a moment to reflect. This wasn't just about letting go of people she had once trusted. It was about making sure the foundation of her company remained unshaken. She had always prided herself on creating a space where hard work, integrity, and excellence were valued above all else. But what had she seen? A group of people who had lost sight of those very values, who had let complacency seep into their daily routines. She couldn't allow that to continue. Raquel's eyes shifted from the window to the desk in front of her. It felt like the center of the storm now, an empty desk, a quiet space that had once been filled with voices, with ideas, with dreams. But that was in the past. Today was different. Today marked the beginning of something new. She turned her back to the window and took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs. She could feel the weight of what she had just done, but there was something else rising inside her, a sense of clarity, a renewed sense of purpose. This was the hard part, the part that demanded her to be unwavering, but the next step was hers to control. She wasn't just rebuilding her team, she was rebuilding her company from the ground up. And this time, she would build it right. Without hesitation, Raquel picked up her phone. It was time to take action. There was no more waiting. The world outside was waiting for her to move, to show what kind of leader she was. As her fingers dialed the first number, she couldn't help but think of the vision she had for her company, a vision that was clearer now than ever before. She wasn't looking for people who just wanted a job. She wasn't looking for those who would show up, do the bare minimum, and leave. No, she needed people who would share her values, her drive, her passion. People who understood that excellence wasn't a choice, it was a requirement. "Hello, is this Anna?" "This is Raquel Jackson," she began, her voice steady and purposeful. As the conversation continued, Raquel's mind raced with possibilities. She knew what she was looking for. The right candidates. The right team. It was time to surround herself with people who were driven, who would push her company forward. People who would never lose sight of what mattered most. As Raquel spoke with Anna, she could feel the weight of the last few hours start to lift. Each call she made, each conversation she had, was a step towards something better. The process of rebuilding was no longer an abstract idea. It was happening in real time. The foundation she had built for her company had been tested, and now she was strengthening it. The team that had walked out today had shown her what wasn't working, and now it was time to create something stronger, more resilient, and more committed than ever before. Raquel hung up the phone after the call, taking a moment to reflect. She didn't allow herself to linger in the sadness any longer. Instead, she focused on the future. There was no time for dwelling in the past. She had made the right choice, and now it was time to take the next steps towards something greater. She looked around the empty office again, but this time, it didn't feel quite so cold. There was a quiet energy in the air, as if the room itself was preparing for the transformation to come. The space was still the same, but it wouldn't be for long. The people who would join her company from this point forward would be the ones who would help her take it to new heights. They would be the ones who would carry her vision with pride and determination. Raquel felt that surge of anticipation. A pulse, a heartbeat, that told her this was just the beginning. Raquel picked up the phone again and dialed another number. One by one, the calls came, and with each conversation, the weight on her shoulders lessened. The vision was unfolding before her eyes. She wasn't just replacing employees. She was building a culture, one that was rooted in accountability, respect, and a shared sense of purpose. This wasn't just about hiring people. It was about creating a team that would bring her vision to life, a team that would push the boundaries of what they could achieve together. As the day wore on, Raquel's office began to feel alive again, not with the stale complacency of the past, but with the promise of something new. She felt a sense of excitement building in her chest, and though the road ahead wouldn't be easy, she was ready for it. She had made the tough decision, and now she would see it through. This was more than just a company. It was her legacy, and she would protect it with everything she had. The phone calls continued, and with each new voice on the other end, Raquel felt the future growing closer. She was moving forward, leaving the past behind, and building something that would stand the test of time. There would be setbacks, no doubt. There would be challenges. But Raquel Jackson was no stranger to adversity. She had built this company from the ground up, and now she would rebuild it once again, stronger, more unified, and more driven than ever before. The building blocks were being put into place. Raquel smiled, a quiet, determined smile. This was just the beginning. A new chapter was about to unfold, and she was ready to lead it. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more engaging content. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the story and how it all ended. Did Raquel's decision resonate with you? How do you feel about her journey from frustration to rebuilding? Rate the story on a scale of 1 to 10 and drop your thoughts in the comments. Also, let us know where you're watching from. We can't wait to hear from you.